All right, so we're gonna call the meeting to order. It's 7 o'clock. And first item on the agenda, are there any changes, additions, removals, or adjustments to the agenda? Nope. Okay. So. Unless, Adam, did you want to discuss S100 first, or did you want to jump into the bylaw stuff first? Which would you prefer?
I think I'd like to give you a summary of kind of where we left off as of last meeting. And then give you a little bit of context about S100 and then kind of move forward.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, so we'll just kind of combine 2 and 3 together and roll with it.
Sounds great.
All right.
Okay.
Over to you.
All right, great. Thanks for having me. Well, let's hope this works, Chris. You sharing your screen?
And about as soon as this PDF opens, I will be.
Okay.
So where do you want it? Which page do you want me to start on?
We're in the Village Mixed District. ROC. There you
How
are.
was that for getting there some time?
All right, good.
We'll
Whoops.
share this. I just gotta share the screen first. Okay.
Now, I think the map is, can you go down one page? So there is Rockydale. And here is the Village Mixed District, and this is where we left off last time. So we've been rewriting your zoning regulations or looking at things that we can change in your zoning regulations, primarily density standards. Although it could be setbacks and other things, but things within your existing regs, how do we change them to increase the possibility of housing? Of promoting basically housing, and I would say any type of housing. So when we were talking last time, we went through a lot of the density calculations. Well, actually, let me start with the map. Again, that's your Village Mixed District. In this district, you do not have a lot of parcels that are challenged with setbacks or road frontage or things of that nature, like you did in your neighborhood district. This one, they're largely undeveloped districts, and then you have some relatively dense development in there as well. So let's see. Can you go back up to the dimensional right there? Whoops. Great, and down to the bottom of the page, please. So these were your dimensional standards that we talked about earlier. Changes that we made at the last meeting, we talked about basically making the rear yard and the side yard setbacks the same at about 15 feet. Otherwise, we did not make a significant amount of changes to this district yet. When we left off, we were talking about basically density again, and density would include number of units per acre, and it would also include basically your minimum lot size, and in this case it's 15,000 square feet. So 2 units per acre, 15,000 square feet. It's a little less dense currently than your neighborhood designation, which was 4 units per acre and roughly 10,000 square feet. And you left, I guess I would say you, the Planning Commission, you chose not to make a lot of changes in your, what I call your core neighborhood of downtown Bristol. But my sense is that you were thinking that some of these outside districts, like the Village Mixed District, might be, or the ROC district, or the Village Residential District, were places that you might be willing to increase density to develop housing. You felt like your core village was pretty well built out and fixed, and you liked it and wanted to make sure it would work. but you're willing to look at these. And as we went through, we kind of did a poll at our last meeting. And I'm going to just remind you of what I took notes of each of you saying. You can correct me if you think I'm wrong. But Fred, you said multifamily, less than 4 should be treated the same as a single family in this district. Was something that you thought you might be able to support. Rob?
4 units per acre.
Yes,
Okay.
multifamilies, basically. Rob, you said you would consider reducing lot size to 10,000 square feet, which would match basically the village district. I have Melissa. Good. I'm taking short. That's my shorthand for Melissa. Reduce lot sizes to 10,000 square feet was something that you could support. John, increased density in district. Bill, HDR type reasonable and businesses. JM, John Moyer business yard, you wanted to bring this up again. Were kind of the notes that I had from our last discussion. So when we went away, I guess I'll call it homework, or what I wanted you to think about was, all right, how do we want to increase the density of this district? And if so, which of those types of increases work best for you? All right. And since this past meeting, basically S100 has passed. S100 was a bill in the legislature this year designed to promote more housing, and specifically more affordable housing. It had a number of impacts on basically, well, it changed some state regulations, it changed some local regulations. And basically it was aimed at in increasing density, excuse me. So again, interestingly, or the place that it would have the most impact is a place that is served by both water and wastewater. And in the town of Bristol, that's a very small place. And it's not really where your housing is, it's really your downtown business district. So a lot of these impacts are not necessarily mandatory, or a lot of the things that they say in this bill are not necessarily mandatory for the town of Bristol. We'll make the changes in your village business district, or where there's a sewer septic system, but you do not necessarily have to do them outside of that in districts not served by water and sewer, which is most of the town of Bristol, actually most of the village of Bristol. So that being said, a lot of these you can look at, well, the legislature was interested in increasing housing. This grant is to increasing housing. Here are some of the recommendations, or here are some of the, well, here's the law that the legislature passed. It doesn't necessarily apply to this district, but might it be important in this district, is I guess is how I would have you view it. Am I open to that proposal in any of these other districts? And then you get to make your decisions still. You still have some control because of the limited area of the water and sewer. So this bill will be effective July 1st for the sections on duplexes and small multifamily dwelling uses. Other sections, well, section 3 emergency shelters of September. Parking requirements go into effect in December, and other provisions and prohibited effects go into basically are effective December 1st. So it's really the provisions on duplexes and small multifamily units that are effective almost immediately. We're going to talk a little bit about the basically the municipal zoning, the sections that involve municipal zoning reforms. So how does it impact you? And what I would say is in this process, we'll keep doing what we're doing. We'll keep going through your existing districts. And at the end, we'll basically make changes to the village district that are required by these, okay? So we'll kind of keep on schedule, and at the end, we'll use this to kind of clean up and make sure we abide by it, and what you will choose to put forth, assuming you choose to put something forth to the select board, will comply with this. So minimum parking requirements is the first section. Basically, it's one parking space per unit dwelling. Municipalities may require 1.5 spaces for duplex and multifamily dwelling areas, and in areas without sewer and water for multi-unit dwellings, if existing public parking is not sufficient, rounded to the nearest whole number when calculating the total number of required spaces for a multi-unit dwellings. So you can increase it. Generally, it's one parking space per dwelling in your village center. You can increase it to 1.5 for multifamily unit dwellings outside of the village center. We haven't really talked about parking yet, but I plan on getting there. Fred?
Section 4 says, shall not require more than one parking space per dwelling. However, a municipality may require 1.5 parking spaces for duplexes and multi-dwellings in areas not served by water and sewer. So it seemed to me that we could, if we wanted to, say 1.5.
In most places, I agree.
Okay.
Yes. Yep. Duplexes and small multifamily units. Municipalities must allow anywhere single unit homes, also known as single family, single household dwellings, are allowed for year-round use. Most municipalities may not apply more restrictive dimensional standards than would apply to a single unit dwelling, such as required additional land or larger setbacks. In areas served by municipal water and sewer and water, municipalities must allow multi-unit dwellings with 3 or 4 units to be permitted uses. So if you have water and sewer, you need to allow multifamily dwellings with 3 or 4 units to be permitted uses. Accessory dwelling units, we spent a fair amount of time on this, but I think what you all settled on is basically in compliance with this. ADU review, dimensional or other regulations may not be more restrictive than those for single family dwelling units. Also, the criteria to convert an existing detached non-residential building such as a carriage barn to a habitable space for an ADU must not be more restrictive than a single dwelling unit without an ADU. So basically that were the rules that we were kind of playing by anyway when we went through your ADU standards. So I don't believe we need to do those anymore. Dwelling unit density, and I'm not going to do all of these, but I'm going to use hit the ones that we've been really kind of focused on, which are just a couple more. In areas served by municipal water and sewer, that allow residential development, bylaws shall establish lot and building dimensions that allow 5 or more dwelling units per acre for each allowed residential use, and density requirements for multifamily use cannot be more restrictive than those required for single family dwellings. So I'd say it's a 1-to-1 basis. If you require 10,000 square feet for a single family home, I still think you can require 40,000 square feet for say a 4-unit multifamily home, because that would be a 1-to-1 unit to unit density. You may not want to, but you have the ability to do that. And again, that's 5 units. That's only going to be in basically your downtown business district. You have 4 units in a lot of your other districts. That's what we talked about in your village district. I believe you can keep that in all but the areas that are served by water and sewer. And it may get up into your village district a little bit, but not very much. Affordable housing and mixed unit developments, you must permit a density bonus of 40% and a bonus of 1 habitable floor above the height maximum for basically affordable and mixed housing unit developments in your water and sewered areas. And I sent all these to you. So hopefully you all got that this afternoon.
I did, but the link that the state provided was dead.
Oh,
I couldn't get to
To
it.
the summary page.
Yes,
really?
not surprising to the state. Lots of their links are dead.
Oh, I'm
Was
sorry.
that the preliminary one now? Now that's
the one
finalized.
that was in the- it's the one
Yeah, I
that-
saw that, but I think it was labeled as preliminary, so that may be why.
I just got a blank
No,
page.
it's still a preliminary summary. I
Okay.
mean, it just went into law not too long ago and they've. So it's I think there's only a preliminary summary available.
Okay.
And you said you sent that today,
Yeah, I sent that today.
so you'll get
It
my
came
email.
out today.
I can have it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Would
Yep,
you,
yep.
would you try resend that link or something?
Yeah,
when you
I
get a chance?
will.
Not right now, but I'm happy to have you just go through it, but.
Sorry, I didn't realize it didn't go through, or that you weren't able to. Oh, their link was broke. Again.
I can try it from here. No, I get a blank page.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's right off their home act page, like if you follow going to the S100 page,
Yeah,
about halfway down on the first page, it says DHCD's preliminary summary of Act 47 S100. And that link is the exact same dead link that we,
oh, it is, same, yeah, so it's on
yeah,
there.
it's a state page dead.
Yeah,
Okay, sorry, I didn't realize that, but they just put it out, I mean, literally yesterday, I think, is when this, or June 15th, I guess, is when it came out, so. Last Thursday, maybe, so it's pretty fresh, it's pretty new. I'm not sure why the link broke. There's a definition of water and sewer area that gives the town some control over their water and sewer area. So for example, if you have water and sewer running to an industrial park, for example, and you don't allow housing there, you don't necessarily have to still allow housing because of S100. Preparation bylaws, we don't need to talk about that. Limits on appeals. It specifically allows administrative officers to approve minor subdivisions, so that's a bit of a change. I think we wrote Bristol so that Chris, as the zoning administrator, had the ability to approve one lot or just, you could do boundary line adjustments. Okay, so S100 does give you, the planning commission, the ability to allow Chris to do minor subdivisions as an administrative process, basically without hearings before the DRB, if you chose to.
And how is minor defined? 3 or less? Lots? 3 or less lots?
total including the original.
I believe so, yes. Yes, so a major is containing 4 or more lots, 3 new lots plus 3 original, so it would be the original plus 2 new.
Thanks.
Let's see, it basically prohibits conditional use appeals on the character of the area for residential development in state designated areas, so downtowns, growth centers, neighborhood development areas.
And is that just for that related to housing, or is that related to any conditional use?
I believe it's related to housing, but that's a good question.
Where's this?
I'm- It is 24 VSA 4471, appeal to the environmental division. And the summary basically says to prohibit conditional use appeals when the AMP, except manageable practice, has determined that the character of the area is met for residential development in some state designated areas, downtown growth centers, neighborhood development areas. Other elements may still be appealed. So,
Really, the only place that impacts us would be a designated downtown notice, I believe, correct? Because that's all we have.
that's all you have, yeah.
So it's
Yes.
only in areas with sewer and water.
Well. It's in your designated downtown, which is really your business district, which is really, yes, it is focused around your area with water and wastewater.
Yeah, that conditional use statement isn't linked to the water service area. That was linked to the state designated areas
Yes, it was, but
separately.
in order to have a growth center, generally you need water and wastewater, so
Right.
So
they're,
so the two
Indirectly.
maps,
yes.
there's a few outlier properties in our downtown district that are on sewer and water, like over on School Street. But for the most part, they overlap almost identically.
But I'm sorry, just to clarify, so this prevention of using character of the area as an issue for appeal is limited to the areas where there is sewer and water?
It's limited, it's tied to basically the state designations, so your downtown designation, a village center designation, a neighborhood development area. But most of those designations require water and sewer, so it could almost serve as a proxy,
But
but
not
it's,
all.
but
There are exceptions.
Like I said,
maybe some
we
village
have
areas
we have like 3 or 4 little outlier properties in our downtown that aren't.
connected. Yeah, so it's not an exact match. But they're very similar.
For future, is there anything laid out anywhere that shows what the wastewater district is that we could take a look at compared to?
In theory, yes, I searched today, a couple hours I was here and I couldn't find it quickly, so I will email that out to you guys.
It's around there somewhere.
It is, there's an ordinance, but the map
I was
doesn't
in the
make any
select board
sense.
when we did that.
Yeah, the ordinance,
1989. It's there. And I think there are places that aren't on it. Some of them aren't on it by their own choosing rather than we didn't do it. I mean, a good example is John's apartment building on Mountain Street. That's within the district. But prior usage was a big retail center. And they weren't on it. But when John made apartments, he asked the community to go on board. And the only limitation is that the system had capacity. And the capacity is measured by the water usage of each of the buildings.
Mhm.
And he was able to, and final business was able to go on at the same time. Because there was enough capacity available. That's another restricting factor.
Mhm.
Like, I don't think Shaw's is on it, I think
Yes, they are.
they are now. Okay, they weren't, well, no, maybe.
And there is a sort of shovel-ready-ish plan by the town to essentially double the size of the capacity of the system that's down on Vincent Street. So at some point, if that gets built, that will allow either for more capacity in the existing district or expansion of the district or both.
Cool, couple million,
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah, at least, all right.
keeps
Okay.
going up.
So the bill goes on. Those are, I think, for our purposes, the major impacts on municipal. Or basically municipal zoning. So those were the changes that the bill made to municipal zoning, or the biggest ones, the bill change. Yeah, go ahead, John.
So, could I ask you about section 4442, adoption of bylaws and regulatory tool and related regulatory tools, an amendment or repeal? Bristol was a town that passed a referendum by voters some years ago to make changes to the town plan and zoning regulations subject to ballot approval by the town. This would appear to repeal that. Is that the case?
Is there a size limit? Honestly,
I don't see any size limit. I'm just looking at this right here.
The
The
answer is, I'm not sure. I did not basically look at that part of the bill. I understand what you mean.
So it's possible
was-
that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was looking at the stuff that dealt more with zoning.
Sure.
So, yes, I think it is possible that it might override that, rural town provisions. See, I'm not sure if Bristol still qualifies as a rural town because your population's over 2,500. So I'll look into that.
I mean, that is, I would love to know, because that is the status quo in Bristol right now. Unless this has superseded it or something else has. In which case, that would be a vast reduction, to me, at least in my opinion, to our local control, our ability to have a say as townspeople in these kinds of decisions.
Hey, cross that in your reference to your town. As far as I can see.
Well, the legislative body retains the option to vote to put the bylaws to a popular vote, and the voters retain the ability to petition for a popular vote on bylaws following legislative action.
Where's that?
Where is that?
And just in the summary,
But not,
that I'm
not in
reading.
law. It doesn't matter.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
That's what the summary I have in front of me says.
It's not what the law seems to say unless there's another provision somewhere.
Right.
All right, I will look into that for you.
I would really appreciate that, because we did that through great pains. And it had a great positive effect on Bristol when people did have a chance. Starting with making them interested in zoning issues, which, we have a challenge as a board in the town of having people engaged in zoning planning decisions. So it gave people a stake more directly, and it worked wonders. If anybody offline would care for a history on how that came to be, I'd be happy to fill you in. It was supported by 66% of voters when we approved that ability.
Okay. Okay. So, anybody else have any questions or thoughts about S-100?
I do.
Okay,
Clarification. So with ADUs, I know you emphasized the impact within areas that, well, let me step back. In your whole summary overall, you emphasized that a lot of these changes impact only those areas that have water and sewer, but there's plenty of changes here that don't, right? So what are
the
those?
ADU would be one of
The
them.
ADU is a big one, right?
Yeah.
So
Parking extends outside water and sewer. The subdivision that as by allowed administratively goes outside of water and sewer. Any your adoption that you recognize would go beyond that. So there are a number of things that go beyond the character of the area. Would kind of go beyond water and sewer, but all these designations are tied to water and sewer, so they're
that's
right
not clear.
similar. The law is linked to the state area, not to water and sewer designated area.
Well, I would note then, just for the board, that then a lot of these changes do influence, areas that are, the things we're dealing with in Bristol. If we want to, for example, have any sort of say over how people do things we want them to do, which is build ADUs and multifamilies, which I particularly support very much. We have to come up with some way of deciding whether people just get to do whatever they want, or we want to have to say how they do what they're gonna inevitably do anyway, because we welcome it. So I'd flag that as a discussion for the board at some future date. Because this bill does seem to reduce our local control in many ways.
Can I ask a question? I'm just curious about the potential impact change of this sewer and water expansion, if we actually magically get all this money with a lot. I get that, like I was here for the select board meeting, so I know, but then that becomes sort of peripheral properties to the existing sewer and water district that might be able to pop in. How far does that go? I'd be curious to know that, just in the sense that if you have different rules governing what you can do or not do in an expanded district, it's very different when you're saying, well, most of these changes are really limited because your water and sewer district, is quite small, right? As opposed to, oh, well, actually, we're gonna double capacity or whatever we're gonna do, would people even want to? What would that cost and how does it happen? But it'd be nice to have that information to be thinking about that, as we make suggestions and things going forward, just to say, well, what if then? So
Okay.
we're ready.
I do not know where you might expand water and sewer to. I don't know if any.
I just have a hunch. I don't know either, because I haven't been
I
in
gotta
on
see
those
this map.
discussions, but
Yeah.
probably, I mean, when I did, I've added a couple buildings to it.
Yeah.
Maybe just that
Yeah,
one, but,
like- Like any
basically, the
co-housing?
vote that, the co-housing, they're not on it.
No, but like,
The vote that the select board made as acting as a sewer district when I had that building attached was to expand the sewer district to include the property. And then once that was done, if there were capacity, I could attach. So that was the order of business. So, I mean, like, if you look at the downtown, there's 40 or so properties in the sewer district, something 35, 40, something like, and it's right downtown. I mean, you could imagine like at most that doubling surface area wise, because then it would max out the new capacity. I don't know, it'll probably be a combo, right? Growing up and growing out.
My guess. Yes. Is where they also might look is to where areas of commerce could develop. Bristol has been exceedingly limited and has lost, I could probably name 5 or 6 businesses over the last 30 years because we didn't have water and sewer capacity.
Yeah.
And so if we wanted to open up doors for business usage, having sewer capacity for a business would be beneficial so that more kinds of businesses could operate here, even small businesses of 30 or 40 people. That would be a direction I would want them to look in rather than service existing residents that have their existing septic systems or cesspools, whatever it might be, and have been operating without a great deal of problem. That would be my sense of a good use for expanding the school.
But your select board is currently discussing it.
I haven't.
Oh, from John's comment, that's what I was assuming from your comment, John, was that there was something in progress in the works.
No, some years ago.
Oh, okay, so there's, all right, nothing
No,
known on the
It's
table.
not,
Okay.
they tried to get the project as close to shovel ready, meaning if they found money,
Okay.
they could just do it. And I don't know how close they got, but they tried to move in that direction, hoping that, some federal money would come down the
Yeah.
pike someday and then they could build it out. But it's just sort of sitting there, right, Chris?
Yeah, and the technologies have changed since then is the issue.
Right,
And same with state requirements, again, it's because ours is basically 2 big old holding tanks and a leach field, so.
that's it. It's
Yeah,
a
we-
giant conventional system.
Yeah, we don't have a wastewater treatment,
Right,
so. Its expansion capabilities, I think, have actually been reduced, even if they did what they did for, I think it's only a 25% increase now.
There's no limitation because of your.
right. There's probably a curve on that.
Yeah, so
Mhm.
I sort of with Fred, I could almost see it moving down West Street as we try to grow that in that direction. That's where we have some development. And I agree with Fred too. I don't see us adding existing residential. It doesn't make sense. That's not where why you would invest that kind of dollar.
Right, and Bristol's blessed, I mean, if you don't have to, we're sitting on a pile of sand. Everybody else-
Less but limited at the same time, so.
Yeah, less
that's
than
the
limited,
thing.
that's right. I
It's-
mean-
that's one of the biggest limiting factors with the density.
Absolutely.
It's just how much room it takes.
Yeah, and Fred mentioned several large companies, like I was gonna host Vermont Coffee Company, we couldn't do it. And that was too bad, look where they went. But I know of a number of Main Street things that were proposed that wanted to happen, but because they were restauranty and they used a lot of effluent, kind of dirtier
Mhm.
rather than cleaner, like a house effluent. Couldn't happen because they were out of capacity, so that's
I remember when we
unfortunate.
first did it covers, because of capacity, they had to use paper plates and everything else. They couldn't use commercial gift cards. I think things have changed, but back in the day, that was,
I believe they're still hand washing everything.
and they could be. Good water usage. I had one other question on the law, and it was something that came up conversation. And it goes actually to what our existing law is, and that is the inhabitable floor area of a single family dwelling is 900 square feet. Or 30% of the living area in a single family dwelling,
The accessory
Right, the
dwelling.
accessory dwelling unit, yes,
900.
the greater
or
of
30%.
900 or 30%.
Now, it's 30% of the livable.
Yep,
So if you have a 2,000 square foot home,
yep.
you know, 2 floors, that's 600 square feet, so the 900 would do it.
That's
If-
right.
If you have a footprint of 30 by 30,
Mhm,
that means 1 floor is 900, but
mhm.
if it's 2 floors, it's 18 and it's too big.
Yes,
Exactly.
But
Of livable space. So the example we're talking about is a garage down below and an apartment above.
we've talked about
I
this
know we
garage a
did,
few
yeah.
times
So the garage space is what is typically is not counted.
as part of the ADU.
Correct.
But there's no way, I mean, if you look back to the 2017 rules on ADUs, there was a way to deal with that circumstance exactly. It was, the language was in there, if you look at the 2017 ADU section, there's a second paragraph, now there's only one. But in the second paragraph, it says, if, and I'm paraphrasing, you know, if the thing proposed above doesn't meet, then the proposal can go through a conditional use process, and then it can, you know, look at size, fit, this other stuff, and maybe it can get approved. And that language is gone, which is unfortunate, because that would have helped in certain.
I see there's nothing in this law that talks about what you just said. It says 900 square feet.
Right.
It doesn't matter whether it's a garage or living, it's 900 square feet.
I guess I'd tell you that the accessory dwelling is the unit above the garage, and the garage is a separate accessory use
Right.
in the same building.
And that language, if you look back to 2017, it deals specifically with that circumstance where somebody wants to put it on top of, say, a garage. And then it provides a direction for how to deal with that.
And I would say I'd interpret it differently, because one of the standards is in size means the distinct unit is clearly subordinate, that's a whole other ballgame. And has facilities and provisions for independent living, including sleeping, food, the prepper, and is compliant with property. And the unit does not exceed 30% of the total habited floor area. The unit,
Yeah,
when they say unit,
it's the livable unit.
they don't
It's
say
the
that.
interpretation of it, I believe, so,
Well, I could interpret it different.
okay.
That's problematic.
So we're limited with
We
ADUs.
can go on.
By
That was a point because of my situation.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
we're
Thought it was a
limited
question.
with ADUs because of the state
And
law.
that's a good
But
question,
in
though.
addition, what we did, if you remember, we spent a couple of meetings on ADUs 2 or 3 months ago. And basically, we used the clearly subordinate language to make sure that the ADU would be 20 feet behind the main dwelling unit, have a 20% lower than the main dwelling unit, and we also tied it to the the 900 square feet, which is basically what the law says. So you all did several things or made several additions to the law, I think, using the must be, I'm losing the language, substantially smaller or subordinate, thank you, to the primary dwelling to ensure that the structure would be subordinate to the primary dwelling. And that's a change that's a change that you will be proposing when you bring these regulations to the select board and
That
the
long
people.
word that I can't pronounce all the time. Super,
Apurent or.
yeah, apparent, and in character with the primary resident.
Oh, okay,
Moving
So on to,
on to back to
yes,
back to your village mixed district.
Right.
So, well, I've been talking, you all have been thinking really hard about residential density and what you think you would like to allow in your village mixed district. So again, on the table from last time were reduce lot size to 10,000 square feet, and that was something both Rob and Melissa supported. There was increased density in the district. Fred had stated basically treating a multifamily dwelling unit less than 4 the same as a single family dwelling unit, which provides it with a lot less density. You can put, if you can put a 4-acre or 4-unit apartment or multifamily building, the same place you can put a single family dwelling, that'll make a denser place. So at this meeting, it's up to us to come together and decide what you all can agree on.
In your notes, Adam,
Mhm.
from previous, do you recall where we landed, or rather didn't exactly land, but generally felt about bonuses for density with multi-units?
We talked about it.
I know we talked about it.
And we didn't particularly land in any place, and the law, if you're, again, one of the changes in the new law that we should think about, don't necessarily have to follow in this district because we're outside water and sewer, is basically a 40% density increase. What Fred's talking about, allowing 3 or 4 multifamily units on the same area as a single family unit, is significantly larger than 40%. So you can go to 40, which is kind of funny for the math, unless you're doing a big development. Or you can go 1-to-1, so you can say duplexes are allowed everywhere that a single family dwelling is allowed in this district, which is something Chris supported, I think, previously in one of your meetings, because he felt that way you didn't have to mess around with ADUs. You could build a duplex and just make it that simple. So we should be thinking about both duplexes and multifamily dwelling units, and let's keep it maybe under 3 or 4, and then we can talk about bigger multifamily dwelling units and whether we want to allow the same bonuses, I guess, is what I would suggest for ease, or the ability for us to get to some kind of consensus. And it looks like Melissa has her hand up.
Yeah, I had to duck out last time because of the headache, but did you come to a conclusion on lot coverage? Did we?
We did not.
Okay,
Is the firehouse development with those units? There's 16 units. I don't know how many buildings there are. 6.
It's 3 buildings with 20 units.
Okay. And so, and is that in the district we're discussing?
Portion of it is.
So there's an example of where we allowed what I suggested might be a good idea. Is that you build more density, or you allow it within a acre or whatever the case might be.
They also had to add land to meet the
Yeah.
density.
Yeah.
So they still had to meet the density, so they had to acquire more land.
And they
to
were
meet that.
unable to build as many units as they went because of that.
Well, the town of Bristol worked with them, and they acquired basically from the community stand along West Street, along the bank, minus one little chunk, all the way back to their project to add, required, I think, 3 acres to be able to bring their density up so that they could get all 20 units in.
Basically the bank down to the river.
Oh, yeah, it's undevelopable land, but they were able to use the acreage to add the density.
Great.
Works, but
So the question is, should they have had to do that? And do you like what came out of at Firehouse Lane? And would you like to see more of it? Because certainly a part of it is in the village mixed district, and a part of it was in the
Yeah.
ROC
Oh,
district.
one of the other things, and I talked to Chris about this earlier in the week or last week. And what does an acre of land cost in this area or close by? Or a building lot?
Depends if
And
you're
you're,
building
and
on-
you're talking about 85 to 100 grand.
Mhm.
There's a building lot that's sold down off Hewitt Road for 134,000. And there's 10 acres back there for $1 million. You gotta allow high density or it's not gonna be affordable to folks. You've got to. That's where I'm coming from, is looking at the realities. Unless the market collapses, the real estate market collapses and land prices plummet as well. And I don't think we want the circumstances where that would probably occur, would be my guess. We have to allow higher density in these peripheral areas, if the goal is to increase housing for people of all economic backgrounds. Otherwise, it's only going to be people that are in the 120% above median and higher that can be able to afford anything.
I would just add to that by saying density is what's coming. Most of the development that's coming is gonna be higher density than what we have, if not all of it. There'd be single family homes built, but even they will be, maybe on smaller lots, but the density that's coming, especially because S100 now, is gonna be multifamily and ADU, and that's great as long as it's not the wild, wild west. And I hope that we can find a way in Bristol to shape and guide what is inevitably coming, this higher density stuff, in a way that, makes the community even better.
Okay, so if I may.
Yeah.
Let's focus on density for a second and then on lot size, and they're absolutely related to one another.
Can I make a proposal? It'll jump to the chase.
Please.
I would like to see, I would like to see, and this does just sort of set a conversation piece, but I could see conceptually supporting myself. Basically adopting the HDR rules for these things that exist now in the HDR all the way throughout the mix zone. So if that would mean, for example, currently HDR is 4 dwellings, an acre density, 10,000 lot size, 50% lot coverage, 75-foot front setback and depth, or frontage and depth, sorry, frontage and depth. And like, when Bristol established a village planning area, which includes a lot of what is in the mix zone now, if not all of it. The idea was to see the fabric of the village expand into that area, and that would sort of set that stage in my mind. And so that would be a proposal I could discuss, as long as part of the larger discussion over time, we have some way of, what's the word I'm looking for, addressing the impacts or the potential impacts of that greater density. So I could definitely see supporting something like HDR extended all the way through mix.
So
That's my conversation starter.
So basically, there's not much difference apart from the coverage and the lot size are the two things that really change.
Coverage and dwelling
Density.
per acre.
Well, density goes with the.
Well, and the
lots.
permitted uses, right?
We're not necessarily changing the uses.
We're not
Yeah.
looking at uses apart from.
So we're just looking at the dimensional standards on the lower half of the screen.
Mhm.
So residential density in your village, in your high density residential district, or what I call your village. The heart of your village, it's 4 dwelling units per acre. Your residential lot size is 10,000 square feet per acre as opposed to 15. So. Frontage depth are close to the same. Your lot depth is a little bigger in your mixed district, but
Yep.
from 75 to 100.
The setbacks.
The setbacks are basically.
It was 15 and 10, I think, in the HDR instead of 25 and 15.
Yep, that's true. Last meeting, you said you'd move them both to, I thought it was 20. No, 15 to 15.
Mhm.
And that would get you pretty close to your side yard. In the high density residential district as well. So. Here, just summing it up, you've got residential density, 2 units per acre. In your high density district, you have 4 units per acre. Your residential lot size is 15,000 square feet. In the high density residential districts, it's 10,000 square feet. Your lot depth is 75 feet in the high density residential district. It's 100 feet here. Front yard is the same, basically, and your side yard. Well, in the high density residential district is 15 feet for principal dwelling units.
And your lot coverage also is off.
On your lot coverage is the same, isn't it?
No, it's,
No, it's 50% in HDR
Oh, excuse me, 50%
compared to 20.
Yeah, a maximum, yes, compared to 20.
So. Let's see, Melissa, you have any thoughts on that? We'll go around.
And I guess it would make sense to change the lot coverage if you're changing everything else, because you don't want to get caught. If you're providing for more density on smaller lots, you're gonna need to change the lot coverage.
Mhm.
And that's
So
a 3,000 square foot home. Sorry, Melissa.
that's okay. So you're talking about actually just changing the districting, or actually just changing this mixed use to match?
Changing the requirements in the mixed use village mixed district to match or more closely match. the
Okay,
HDR.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem with that. It's just that, the discussion of the lot coverage. Are you talking about just blanket match it, or?
That's what John was proposing.
And
So
what
that's-
is the, but the lot coverage is not,
Well, lot coverage is how much of the building can cover the lot.
right.
So on a
So-
10,000 square foot lot, you could have a 5,000 square foot building
Right.
if it was
But it just-
50%.
Okay, so that's the thing. It just depends on if it's residential or commercial,
Right.
the size, and then we're talking
The
about
way it currently
adjusting
is.
that.
And also increasing the density to 4 units per acre.
Right.
The septic. What language does one put in to deal with that? Because
I don't
It's
think
all
you
state
do.
regulated.
that would be at the regulators issue to say you can't do it, you don't have enough land. Where, because it's more clay here than it is.
It's all subject to state permits for,
Right,
All A&R.
So we're,
yes, everyone will still have to meet wastewater requirements, but, and I'd also say if your existing village density works. Then it probably should work in this area, because it's pretty close. I haven't done, soil samples in the mixed district versus.
once you get down
never
the hill, it gets.
things can change.
Gets
You
pretty
get
rocky.
veins of this and whatever, that's just
Okay.
out of whack.
Yeah, there's clay around Maple Street, but not on Pleasant. It's like, you don't know why, but yeah.
As a historical note, back again, when we kind of set the established zones, or they got mushed around a little bit, and we put a line around the village and said, call it the village planning area. And that went to a public vote. It was very much a conversation, a matter of public conversation at the time, and it received 66% of the vote to, consider the village planning area as the place where the current fabric gets to expand, and you don't get to go east or west, really. So if you notice, it's north and south of those areas. So this, I think, would be in keeping, something along these lines at least, would be in keeping with the public's express intent that many years ago, but still something that was solidly voted on, much discussed in
All
public
right,
and agreed on.
let's hear from everybody else. Bill, do you have any thoughts on changing those requirements for density, lot size, and in that area?
there it is.
Yes. Could you put up the map again of the mixed use area?
Rocky Dale.
Leverage Land, Human Road, yeah. And a little bit up and north of Pine Street.
Yeah.
Which is already being developed, really, that section up there. It's got proposals in the
Is it plank? road?
in the line.
Is the beginning of the plank road on it?
No, stop short. of Pine.
Just Doug Beam's field, the corner piece,
Okay, in the interior there.
that's what this lot right here is.
Yeah, and then in the lot south of that, is that where there's, I'm really positive, I think, having heard the hearing on that, what's proposed for that lot that Chris is swinging over right now is essentially an extension of the village up into there, actually a little denser, I think, which is good. I think there's gonna be some multi-units or
They're all-
duplexes or something, I can't remember.
He's going back and forth between duplexes and single families, but basically side by side.
Yeah, the initial plat that we looked at looked really positive.
Adam Thomas.
Adam Thomas.
And where, in back by Beams place in there?
Yeah, it would be 6
Yeah.
units coming off
Okay.
and.
Let's-
Yeah.
Let's move along.
So Bill, sorry about that, you're back.
Okay, so the map I'm looking at has some different colors. Is it the chartreuse area colored? What exactly is the boundary?
It's everything that's colored in green, and the light green as opposed to what I'll call the olive, or the beige as opposed to the olive, has to do with, I can't see the key.
I'm moving him.
Village commercial and
So,
greater than 1,000 square feet.
so your dark green is commercial, is listed as commercial and miscellaneous. Your light green and teal, or whatever you want to call this, are your residential parcels, as you've called out. If that makes sense.
So they're all in the district, but it's a mixed district, so some are more commercial than others.
So this change would be applying to the residential portion.
No, it'd be applied to the entire district.
This is just showing what's currently used as residential versus commercial or miscellaneous.
Like the high school and landfill, or previous landfill, fall under miscellaneous.
We're not getting to that.
So describe for me again the change in
But
density.
the change in density would be going from 2 units per acre to 4 units per acre. And from 15,000 square foot minimum lot size to 10,000 square foot minimum lot size, as well as increased coverage, lot coverage from 20% residential to 50%.
I expect I could go along with that.
Okay.
It seems like a very big change though, so I wouldn't be unhappy to see a little less of an increase in density. But let's see what others have to say.
Okay. Slim?
Hi, yeah, my first thought on this area around Hewitt, going down Hewitt Road, I know is the septic is not going to be the same as up here in the village. So that water table is quite high, so I'm not exactly sure what can be handled there compared to the village, which is, as we know, ideal for septic. That's all I have to say. I mean, I'm for this. I don't see anything wrong with this, but I do know the septic, I believe, is going to be difficult, more expensive, whatever, for people trying to do this. In some areas there, I know it's like that. I'm not sure about the whole area. That's about all my thought.
Fred? Anything? Okay. Okay,
I'm actually also.
okay.
happy with that.
Paula,
I'm
any
good.
comments or questions or input?
No, I think it takes pardon? It deals with the reality of development coming, right? Like, we want our whole village to develop, like, development's coming, we need places for people to live. And I think that it takes the existing character of our high density residential and it attempts to expand that. It won't be the same. It can't be the same, for all the reasons mentioned. Most, a lot of that land is not developable. And like, you're not gonna be able to put houses on a hillside and, there's clay and whatever, but, as a new person, I'll say, yeah, that sounds logical to me, reasonable.
And commercials continue to be An acceptable use, and it's.
Yeah, we're not looking at uses
Yeah.
related to that at this time, just the residential density.
Okay, so what I have are basically residential density moving from 2 units to 4 units per acre, lot size, minimum lot size moving from 15,000 square feet to 10,000 square feet. Lot coverage moving from 20% to 50%, lot frontage and depth moving to 75 feet. Rear yard, side yard, basically being the same at 15. That's what you voted on last time. Let's see, if I look at high density, it's 15.
I would say leave them at 15.
Leave them at 15.
Yeah,
Okay, well, currently your village mix, your rear yard's 25, your side yard's 15, and at the last meeting of this year, we talked about making them the same 15 and 15. Because sometimes it's hard to distinguish between which is the rear, which is the side in some of these. And your side yard, rear yard setback in the high density residential is also 15, so it basically works. And those would be the changes.
So the 15 side yard in the HDR is a change,
No,
but it's 10.
no,
For-
we're talking about the village mix right now.
Yeah, yeah.
We're not doing anything with the HDR right now. We're just looking at the village mix that is accessory buildings.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Primary.
Thank you. Yeah, I knew I'd seen that number sometimes.
The only question I have, so you're only looking at changing your residential, because the only other deviation in that was your commercial lot coverage currently is at 40 in your village mix.
So for simplicity, change them both and
To
make
make
it,
it just 50 across the board and just be done, or would you like to leave them at both? That's the only point of clarity of ask for.
I'm sorry, Chris,
so currently in the village mix, it's
Yeah.
20% coverage for residential and 40% lot coverage for commercial uses.
okay,
So if we're going to 50% for residential, it doesn't make sense to leave commercial at 40 instead of making it 50% lot coverage across the board for the zone.
It could be.
You're saying
You're apt to have a lot more parking
you want
in
to
a
favor,
commercial setting. I would
you
think
want
the
to
way it
favor
is.
more lot coverage for residential instead of commercial?
I would.
I,
Parking doesn't count in your lot coverage.
no,
Oh, it doesn't.
it's only buildings for lot coverage.
But you have less parking available if you allow a building to cover more of the space.
We still have half the
So if you
lot.
have a
Yeah.
professional building of some kind. And it would be good if there were 12 or 14 parking spaces there. Or a place we approved in Hewitt Road, which hasn't been developed yet for a construction company. That has large trucks and everything else. You wanna make sure they have the space to do it. Now, I guess they don't have to use all 50. They could always do 40, but I have no problem with commercial and residential being different.
I think for ease of management and ease of,
As long as you can read-
Administering
as long
it
as you can
and-
read,
and
you should
reading
be able
it?
to figure it out.
well, that's what you would think, yet things still happen and they
I
get
know.
confusing. So
They
I
should
think
be.
that if we can simplify it by increasing that 10%, we're increasing the residential 30%. So if we increase the commercial 10% and just have it a flat 50, I think that would make it more reasonable to moving forward, in my mind.
And me, the only reason why I ask is actually. I look more at mixed use buildings. Because I think it's really confusing what the lot coverage is. If you want to do a mixed use building where you have retail or commercial downstairs and residential upstairs, which one does that fall in?
Commercial. Would be you take the lower usage.
More impactful usage, consider it that way.
But if you wanna make them, if I'm in a minority here, that's fine, it's not that big a deal. I guess I'm just thinking from a practical situation that could arise, but there's nothing to say that someone who has a commercial spot. Would say, geez, I've got 4 dump trucks, loaders and everything else, I'm not gonna use all 50%, I'm gonna use 35, so I have room for the other.
So would it,
Or either that or he squeezes his neighbor.
Well, I would like to think if somebody's planning a use for something, they want to overbuild and plan themselves out of it by overbuilding, but how they wanted to use it, but.
Would you guys be, what about rolling back your residential authority and making that, does that still increase, that doubles the residential capacity?
I don't mind them being different. I mean, it's easy to read.
All right, we'll run around real quick. John?
I'm
your
at
thoughts?
peace with them being different. I frankly would like, if keeping it at 50 and 40 gives residential a little bit more likelihood of being built there, I sort of favor the residential, so I would like, if that's the effect of that, then I could see doing that, but I wouldn't say I have a strong opinion about it.
Sure.
I'm actually in favor of increasing to 50%. We decreased our lot size down to 10, 50% of that's 75,000. For a commercial building, that's not a very big building.
Okay.
No strong feeling one way or the other. No.
Bill, any thoughts on lot coverage for the village mixed district and residential versus commercial?
I could go either way on this question.
Okay. Slim? Oh, muted.
You're muted.
Slim, you're on mute.
You're muted.
There it is.
Sorry.
There you go.
I have no problem with either of these numbers, but I didn't like the idea that, we should make them the same because it would be simpler to for our administrators, et cetera. I think we can figure out I think we should make our decision on, well, what do we think is more effective for the zone for what we want? And I can't say I'm strongly opposed or for any of these things, but let's not make it just because it's simpler. Let's try to make it so it works if we can think up some reason why one should be different than the other one. That's all. And I can't really think of one myself, but that's all.
Okay, Melissa?
No, I think 50 is good. I mean, if it's just enough that hopefully it won't, if it was a little bit smaller, it might discourage businesses from coming to that property.
Well, aren't
You know what I'm saying? If it's just,
aren't we here trying to encourage residential use though? I thought.
We are.
sure, but
As we're changing things, it impacts other things,
But that's the thing is that if it's 50, if it's equal, I think it's better in encouraging, I don't know, or we find other ways to encourage people to have a business, but to have apartments on top, have residential. So, I mean, it's 50 sounds good to me.
Didn't hear a consensus.
I heard a 50-50.
What's the-
It's a lot
No,
of
50 residential, 50 for
Yeah,
commercial as well.
it's currently 40% for commercial and 20% coverage for residential.
I'd be curious, and Bill, once again, if you're not on mute, why did the original zoning plans make such a pretty dramatic difference between the two? 20% for residential, 40% for commercial in terms of the footprint. Do you recall if there was a logic behind that?
Well, it wouldn't be uncommon that there was limited logic about any decision that we made. But I believe much of this area previously had been zoned commercial. And it was only in later versions that there was more of an interest in encouraging residential in this zone. But that was what I remember, Fred.
Okay.
So what I've heard is that it seems like you have reached consensus around basically residential density from 2 to 4. Or basically going to the dimensional requirements of the HDR district. So 4 units, 10,000, minimum lot size, 10,000 square feet, 50% coverage for residential. question about the commercial, 75 feet for lot front and depth, 15 for side and rear yard setbacks. And the only question is whether, the commercial should also move up to 50% or whether it should remain at 40%. And
Or there was a third option to make them both 40, I heard, so.
okay, so, and I didn't hear a consensus around that.
There was no consensus, no.
The other thing I go through in my mind's eye, and I'm trying to think if there's a way that, from a practical standpoint, this is a mixed use area. And when we're talking about commercial, that means a broad range of businesses types. And if you have residential adjacent or across the street, they know if they bought a house there that this is mixed use. But I'm sure they're gonna also want the impact of that to be more limited rather than it being larger. And I don't know whether the footprint, when it comes to noise, when it comes to lights at 4:30 in the afternoon in December and everything else, whether the footprint of the building, which might permit more activity or not, would have an impact on the residents that lived adjacent to that building. Or if the 40% footprint a little smaller, but it had less of an impact. I have no clue how logical that is, but it crosses my mind.
I might suggest to you all that in a village like Bristol, generally your commercial densities are a little denser than your residential districts. And to get that density or coverage, it makes sense to me that they should be at least the same. Well, I think I'd steer you towards the 50-50 and making them the same if that matters at all to all of you. If you visualize what's out there, I think that gets you to a better result.
Most people didn't seem to care one way or another.
Well,
And I'm the only one that's been more vocal on the 40. And it's not it's not, I guess, that big a deal for me to change to 50 in order for this to work.
okay,
And I'll just hope I'm not wrong and something happens in 7 years that made me feel that I shouldn't have done that. We'll see.
okay, so. On that, we'll go with 50. Hearing consensus, 50 across the board at this point. Okay. There we go.
Wow, that was progress, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much. Yeah, all right, good. Now, I have a question for you, Rob, as
Yeah.
chair. John had said he wanted to talk about business yards. We're talking about housing. I believe the business yard you're concerned about is in the village mixed district. Am I correct?
That was one that started my interest, but subsequently there's another. But it's not village mix, so I wasn't gonna talk about that one, but.
So I don't know if I guess I'm asking Rob whether we want to take that up now, or we want to move on to our next district, keep focusing on housing and take it up later.
With timing that we have, with what time it is, I think we should get an introduction to the next one and table the uses at this time for another conversation, so we have a little more time for it, because I know that's not gonna be a quick one.
Okay.
That's fine with me, as long as we get back to it.
Yeah,
Okay, so moving on from the village mix district, I think I would go to the Rock district.
Back to the hours.
You went, we could do the.
I was just thinking on the agenda, he had the village residential on the agenda.
All right,
That's
then
what I
let's-
was going there.
Let's do the village residential. Let's go to village residential then. I pulled the wrong one.
It's all good. Let's share this back.
So let's take a look at the map first. And where's our key? It's over here. Let me look at that.
So your frontages are the only you're not gonna. Even small, you're not gonna be able to see the map that well. Let me see if I can-
That's okay. You can let, everybody can see where the district is in, the districts are in gray. The lots are in, yellow, so that all the lots don't necessarily fall within the district. Some of them are like that little longer one piece that falls up onto the forest district on that side. There are a couple of them over there. But the district that we're talking about is basically in gray, and it's around your existing village is what I would tell you. Objectives and guidelines. It's the purpose of this district to create a transitional zone between the village core and the surrounding rural and agricultural area. The district shall allow for increased residential density and compatible small businesses and civic uses in areas extending outward from Bristol Village. The intent of this district is to extend the character of the village into adjoining areas that are currently less densely developed to provide opportunity for residential growth in proximity to downtown Bristol. Okay, so that was the objective written in your zoning regulations. Current density in this district, there you go, dimensional standards. So basically this one is also 2 units per acre. Interestingly, it's got a minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet, so the same as your district, as your village district. Lot frontage and lot depth are the same as the village district. Lot coverage is 30%. We just talked about 50%. Front yard setbacks 45. Is that a little long? That's a little bigger, isn't it?
Yeah, 5 feet.
That's 5 feet bigger. Let's see, side yard, rear yard is 20 feet as opposed to 15 feet. So big differences, or really the big significant differences in the residential density. This allows 2. Your high density residential allows 4. The lot size is the same, the frontage, the depth are the same, the coverage is less, it's 30%. And then there are very small differences in front yard setbacks and side yard, rear yard setbacks. So, given those objectives and guidelines, are you interested in changing the dimensional standard or the lot coverage?
You guys want to see the map again?
I was just about to ask if we could. see the
That's where I was
map.
going. I was like, I think we need the map now.
And could you differentiate between the sort of pale green and the chartreuse areas?
So the chartreuse gray.
No, chartreuse is like.
The green, yellow.
The yellow stuff,
green.
yeah.
So I think what it's showing you is the underlying district is the gray.
Right.
The lots do not all necessarily line up with the underlying district. Some lots have little bits, for example, that go into a different district.
But the chartreuse color are current residential lots. They just, a few of them overlap into other districts.
Great. So that's all of the district there,
There's
Yeah.
homes on those.
but just divided up inside of the boundary. I got you.
Yeah,
And it looks like the green is just, it does not have residential on it yet.
And
It could, but, okay.
Right.
Yeah.
the other thing that I would tell you is a significant portion of this district also lines up with your village planning area boundaries, specifically on the eastern side by the mountains.
What's the conservation district?
Yes,
Yes,
it mostly abuts the wilderness. If you're talking about the areas on the south, to the east of that, it abuts the wilderness area, national forest wilderness area, and to the south, it's private land. There's one lot I see sticking in there to the east that's not colored either green or down south, Chris. Further right, no, go right there. Like that has the bold boundary around it, but it's neither pale green or.
Well, I think that's part of the lot. That goes into another district. I think that's part of that
And the
lot right
residents,
there.
where are the residents on top of the hill above Lathrop's? Those are the
Oh,
residents.
on South Street or
Yeah, on
up?
South Street, and with the access, you go up there and there's
Right
some
here.
homes.
There's
along-
two homes.
Yeah, this is South Street here, and those ones you're talking about, you can.
In that area there, okay.
So,
The light green is Lathrop's property, assuming it's still Lathrop's, right?
they've sold the northern half.
So with the objective at the top of this that you read, it indicates that it shouldn't match the HDR density by providing a transition, correct?
It's the purpose of this district to create a transitional zone between the village core and the surrounding rural agricultural area. The district shall allow for increased residential density and compatible small businesses and civic uses in areas extending outward from Bristol Village. The intent of the district is to extend the character of the village into adjoining areas that are currently less densely developed to provide opportunities for residential growth in proximity to downtown Bristol. So I read that and it could be transitional and a little, not quite as dense, or it could be basically very similar. And that's above my pay grade. That's
John, yeah.
I would make the same proposal along the lines, and I'm not being rigid here, I'm throwing it out as a discussion starter, but moving something towards the, just make sure, the HDR standard, just like we did on.
So which would be for this, increasing the density and the coverage, I think, are the two biggest changes from this, going from
Yes,
2 units per acre to 4 units per acre. And going from 30% to 50% lot coverage would be the largest changes.
yes, and again, I would make the same, for me, the same sort of contingency. I mean, I would hope that this board would find a way that we're gonna, if we're gonna increase this density in these zones as well, which I would favor. If there are increased protections for the existing uses in those zones, so that there's some way that we treat all properties the same in terms of dealing with a simple site plan review that reviews light and noise and how things fit into the existing fabric. If we're gonna extend the fabric, let's extend it. But let's make sure that there's, protections against adverse impacts from extending it. So that's just putting a marker out there that says, improving the density is not enough unless we improve the protections for the density that we create.
Okay.
And just so I'm caught up, that is an ongoing discussion around all of this or not?
So, sorry to not
No.
introduce you to what we've been working on, but we've been working on zoning. What's it titled? Adam, if you would help me out, bylaw modernization.
Yeah, with the intent, basically the grant that they got from the Agency of Commerce was that you would look at your bylaws and look to revise them to provide for more housing and specifically more affordable housing. So what are some of the changes? And we've been discussing dimensional standards and other things that you all can make within the village planning area that would provide for those increases. John's looking for other site plan reviews that would protect, if you're going to be more dense, would protect people from, say, lights over the property line or excessive noise or some other criteria like that. One of the issues currently Bristol doesn't have that for single family and duplexes. Basically, and state statute doesn't necessarily provide for having site plans for single family homes and for duplexes. You do have site plan review for multifamily units and for commercial units.
And according to our own bylaws, permitted use may be subject to site plan review according to the definitions. So, but however, the state has told us now that we may not. So we've created a situation where they've opened the door to higher density, which I think as a concept, this board supports. I certainly do. But they tied our hands in saying we can't help that density conform unless we're gonna apply all those rules to all single family home
So
proposals.
it would have to be a blanket, okay.
Yeah, which I think could be done in a way that's sensitive, but the consensus of the board to date has been not that open to doing so.
Thank you.
That's a
Just
fair
feedback, that helps. Yeah,
There you go. So, does anybody have? Open it up for any comments or anything at this point. I think we're running out of time with Adam for tonight.
I think we may be able to drive this decision home, though.
You think so?
We've got
Okay.
5 minutes and I'm confident in your abilities.
Okay,
So I think go around and if everybody's ready with a consensus, we'll do it. If people want to think about it, we'll save it to next time.
Melissa?
So this is to do what we just did with the mixed use for this, right? Change to, oh boy, I cannot talk today. I'm sorry.
Yes,
But-
it's basically to mimic the HDR requirements again with this village residential district.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like a good idea to me, so. That's pretty
Slim?
much all I have to say.
Okay,
Well, I'm actually a property owner on the part going up Hogback Mountain, and I thought that the idea there was always to, keep drainage under control. We have a hill here, right? So if you have 50% cover, and if you look at that map, a good deal of that zone that is this zone we're talking about goes into that hill, not the steepest part by any stretch. So I think we need to be careful about letting structures cover 50% of our hillside here. And then we're gonna have driveways and parking areas and et ceteras. And we have had some serious flooding in this town in my time here. And I don't know, I think maybe we could, and as it is transitional, maybe it could be a little less dense. I'm not willing to go like up, I just don't think it's right to cover this hillside with 50% coverage of structures, for example.
okay.
Okay,
Melissa, you have a question?
Is it possible to separate this into two things then and not, consider the, the geology and the geography of the area? So we don't have to do the whole thing, but,
No, we're not looking at splitting the district at this point.
no,
I think she meant, could you increase the residential density, but keep the lot coverage relatively low? Was that your question, Melissa?
that, something like that. Yeah. I'm just, just what Slim was talking about it going up. We don't want, these high density up there on the mountain or up the hill.
Okay. Bill?
not so much anyway,
Okay,
perhaps.
Well, I was somewhat uncomfortable going to the higher density in the previous discussion, so I'm not ready to go to high density in this one. I think we think about the implications a little bit more.
okay, so you want to leave it as it is at 2 units per acre?
Yeah, for now. Mhm.
Okay. Anna, you have any?
I would say I don't know enough to
Okay.
really say yet. I have some thoughts, but
Okay. Ken?
I'm with Bill and Slim on this. I would like to leave it the way it is right now. I'm feeling like
Okay, Fred?
it needs to put out that much.
My gut feeling is you do make an exception for the mountainside. I've been here through the weather events. Significant amount of damage occurred to people on Mountain Street and certainly the people up on the hillside. And if you increase the footprint up there, there's just more dollars. whether it's taxpayer dollars or the dollars of the people that live there.
Mhm.
So I don't think it's practical. But the land out on Plank Road and some of the other areas, I would support increasing the density. And so that's how I feel about it, is no, from a practical standpoint, for that portion that's along Mountain Street
Mhm.
and goes up the mountain a little bit. And but I'm fine with it, where we're already expanding the footprint. We have an apartment building on that property out there with I don't know how many units on it, and that's the kind of stuff that makes a difference and can reach people that have less income to be able to afford a single family home on 2 acres,
Mhm.
or on a half acre.
So my thought is that this should stay a transitional zone, because what abuts this on the outside is RA1, correct?
And look at that map.
And both, and 2. So that would be you going from 4 units per acre to 1 unit per acre as a stone wall, and this was intended to be that segue into the village area where it gradually increases in density, and I think that it should stay as that transition is my thought on it.
Okay. It's 8:30. Why don't, I think I heard a pretty hard no in the area along the mountainside, so to the east of town. I don't know whether Fred's point about exploring up in Plank Road or perhaps down in the south of town. You know, should those then become village mixed district or something like that? Maybe we pick up this discussion basically here next time.
Okay,
Does that sound
Are
fair
we-
to all of you?
were we going to talk about redistricting at any point with this, or was the whole goal and intention just to look at the existing zones? Because now we're starting to,
Yeah, I had not planned to get into redistricting, but you all made some both compelling arguments on the mountainside and on the kind of the Plank Road area. So I guess I'd be, if you're willing to indulge in that conversation, or if you think that conversation might have some merit, I'm willing to go there. If you don't, if you think that's gonna be too much for us, and we've got basically, we need to be done by October or so with this. We're actually, the way you guys went through,
that's only 3 more meetings and then we're in October.
yeah, I know,
So-
so.
I think if we start, my concern would be if we get into redistricting, it kind of opens the floodgates quite literally, because there's a whole wall of water behind that. With starting to look at those districts. I'm not saying that it couldn't be of use. My concern is the time we have to be able
Well,
to complete.
With the mountain stuff, you don't change any of the dimensions or anything else. You just carve out and call it village residential 2. And it stays the way residential 1 is now, and you look, if you want to, at those other areas and change it.
But if we do that for that, is it worth looking at other districts that may have some other anomalies where it could be beneficial to increase density here and not there? That's my concern, is that once you tip your toe into it, you gotta be fair to all.
10 total.
Well,
But they wouldn't all be impacted by the current conversation, which is focused on residential density and increasing opportunities for people to live.
And it's close to
Like
the.
ag isn't gonna.
No, it's just the village
Yeah,
planning area,
exactly.
which has,
All 10, I think, will be impacted during your discussion.
so we were not gonna change, if I pulled up a map of your village planning area, I don't think there's one in that slide deck. If you've got one. I was not gonna look at, I mean, you have some conservation area in your village planning area. I wasn't gonna look at that. You have R1, R2, R5. I really just.
Village?
In the village, there's a small sliver up in the north. There's a small sliver down in the south. I wasn't gonna look at those. So my plan was to keep it, and I wasn't gonna look at your commercial area. So we really have the ROC district. Sorry, we have the ROC district, which is the orange around West Street. And then we have your downtown district, which is the, I'll call it the purple. At the very heart, of your business district, and then we will have looked at basically all of them. So we're not that far off. We have a few big picture items, like parking, for example, although that's the scope of that debate has been limited. But we've got some big and subdivision, we've got a few more big picture issues. So you potentially have the ability to digress a little bit timing wise. If you want to have this discussion around Plank Road or the south of the village. But I would not encourage you to digress to a lot of other redistricting conversations, because we won't be able to make it.
There's no reason why we can't have 2 meetings in September if we have to. That's what you do. What 5 acres in the village? I'm curious as hell. Where the hell is that?
It's the way the planning area is drawn, laid out.
So the 5 acres is actually right here. This is the top half of,
Where?
right here at the top. So it's right here. And this is
Plank
Road. Yeah, this is Plank Road here. This is Francis Heffernan's house right here.
Okay.
I believe it's right here. So he's
Where
sitting
the
there
hell is that 5 acres?
because this was 5 acres all the way down here to the last zoning. We added this RA2 in the last zoning to try to encourage growth on Plank Road.
So we don't want to discourage granny growth on 5 acres. Except if you're really rich and it doesn't matter. And I don't like that, never liked it. 5
It's
acres,
also,
residential 5 acres on developable land, I think is very discriminatory. That's my humble opinion. Very discriminatory. But that's discussion for, not this type of a thing, for the next time we do this.
If I could add, I kind of find myself convinced by the folks talking about the mountain side of Mountain Street, that one strip of this zone, and I also would throw my hat in with not wanting to do a whole redistricting, but if this were one place we did it, then I could see my way to supporting that sort of thing, if it could be done right.
It has a very logical reason.
It does.
And the impact of that is not just in that district, if you do have a flooding event with too much
You
flood.
get more water, more driveways, more water going right into the village.
Well, and
It's a
it
big
came-
problem in
it came-
1990.
Down Spring Street,
Yeah,
halfway down Pleasant. You
Yeah.
know, and like took out people's basements.
yeah, two of my
And,
most
Most
significant
merchants
ponds in Bristol were
Yeah,
98 and 89, you know, the 2 deluges that did so much damage.
Okay.
but I don't know that that precludes.
you were optimistic.
Okay,
It's
okay.
There you go. It'll work.
yeah.
It'll work.
It's good to see it.
Good, thank you.
I mean, thank you for your time.
So,
I have a question before we go.
yeah, next meeting,
So-
July.
One thing to look at possibly is, I was just looking at other, without doing a ton of redistricting, without a lot of change and without changing a lot of uses.
Yeah,
Looking at that mountain section and look at it as possibly an RA1. Just throw that out there, think about this for next time and look at, did you hear that, John?
I did.
On the mountainside, that little section, just look at RA1 and see if that might fit where you're looking at as far as uses and what it can do and densities and things. And maybe just changing that one slivered RA1 might be a very easy fix. And then we can continue on.
the 18th of July is our next scheduled meeting.
Great.
So you do have one visitor, it appears. Just so you know.
Yeah, yeah, so we were gonna get,
Actually, you have 2. Jimmy's there, but I don't think Jimmy has anything to say.
yeah, we were just gonna get into administrative matters was next.
Yeah.
So the minutes from 5/16. First thing, those went out with the agenda.
Can we take a minute and read those? I haven't read them yet, sorry.
Or would you like? Yeah.
People that I don't have to abstain because I wasn't here.
Thank
You
you.
don't have to.
I'll see you next meeting.
Thank you, Ashley.
Yeah.
Correct, you don't have to.
It's natural, but you don't have to. If you read the minutes, and it makes sense.
Give me 2 minutes, I'll buzz through.
Okay. For those of you that have not, you could take a look at them. Peggy, I do have one thing on line 97. My first name has 2 B's in it. It should not.
Fussy.
Okay,
So the other thing for today, you can't not approve minutes. You have to approve minutes.
Or revise in the
You can revise them, but they still have to happen eventually.
You can't deny approval.
Yeah.
I will print you a copy of the new zoning regs in the town plan. We get a hard copy of that. I'll do that. It's on Friday or anything.
Okay.
What else is it doing besides minutes?
Just a couple other administrative things,
Hard copies now.
administrative reports next, and then we just got.
All right. I would move that we adopt the minutes from the May 16th, 2023 meeting as drafted.
I second it.
Okay,
That was Fred who seconded it, Peggy.
I'm sorry, who seconded it?
Fred.
Thank you.
all in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. So next is zoning administrator report.
I have nothing.
Okay. So the minutes have not been generated for the April meeting, so we're looking for a volunteer to review the video and generate minutes for that meeting. Is there anybody that would like to volunteer for that?
How detailed do they need to be?
Like Peggy's.
I'm not paid.
None of us are.
No.
I mean, legally, it's who attended, what your agenda items were, and any actions that were
Any votes,
taken, and any votes that were taken on those
Yeah.
actions.
So it could be minimal.
Doesn't need to be full discussions.
Is that video posted already?
It was, because it wasn't up last time I went to look for it.
If it's,
When would you need them? By July 18th?
Yeah,
I can do-
preferably.
I'll do that.
Okay, John will do that. Okay, thank you, John.
and I will make sure the video's up tomorrow.
The one thing, welcome Anna back to Anna, back to the planning commission.
Thank you.
Anna was here when I started on the planning commission almost 6 years ago,
Yeah, I did 16 to 19.
yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Welcome back.
Thank you.
name again?
Daler.
so next item is public comment. Do we have any comments from the public? You see Jim,
Somebody
like
is.
Helen, there was a Helen on there, it's like,
She's come and gone.
okay. Hearing none. Any other motions for this evening?
Second.
All in favor?
Bye.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to see. Show you
Is that
this.
a quickie?
Yeah, super quick. So this is just.
Good night.
About.